Now back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
Welcome back to the program. Red Robinson and the Diner coming up at noon. But right now, it's our friends from MurphyBattista, LLP. We're talking personal injury law on today's episode of The Law Show with Scott Stanley and Steve Gibson from MurphyBattista, LLP. We've been talking a lot about the multiplicity of clients and cases. What an incredible variety of people you deal with. The common denominator is most of these people, in fact, I think it's probably pretty safe to say, Scott, all of the people who end up across the desk from you literally want their lives back.
That's all they want. That's all they want. They would like me to be Superman, to fly around the world, go back in time and make this not happen. But that's just not something we can do.
Right.
So the only thing we can do is just try to, do the best we can with what we can. We can't go back in time. We have to move forward. You really have to focus them on that. A lot of clients want to live in the past. You really have to move them forward. A lot of their counselors are trying to move them forward. And yeah, I mean, you just really have to, try to move the goalposts forward for them.
Right, and it's not always easily accomplished either, Steve, is it? Particularly with a person who is injured and has perhaps suffered a brain injury, and so their powers of comprehension aren't what they used to be, and that makes it even more difficult to understand the complexities of the case that suddenly they are. Right?
Yes. Yeah. We tend to find that people who suffer traumatic brain injuries, especially when they're intelligent, they're inherently intelligent, brain injuries that, have what seemingly is only a mild impact on their life and they're still smart people,
right? They
can be profoundly affected because it just that small decrease in their ability and capacity, emotionally, it causes so many problems for them because they're not performing like they used to.
Exactly.
And that little difference, it's like the difference between, an Olympic athlete being brought down to being a good athlete.
Right.
To a normal person, they think, oh, they're fine. But in fact, that person, that could be so traumatic to have lost that extra edge.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you go about explaining to a client, Scott, as we've identified in the conversation today, that some of these cases literally go on for years? Steve was talking about a case that went on for over 11 years. How do you explain to a client who sits down with you that, look, you're not going to get your life back to the way you want it, but in order for us to achieve some quality of life for you, it may take years. How do you impress that upon people?
Yeah, one of the first questions they ask is, how long is this going to take? And your response is, or should be, look, it really depends on your level of recovery, because it's not wise to settle your claim until we know what your level of recovery is. And after you've got your level of recovery sorted out, we need to know what can you do with that level of recovery. So typically, the cases that I handle, they're probably 2 to 4 years, because it seems to be that most injuries, if say you've got a brain injury, you're going to continue to see spontaneous neurological recovery for about 2 years until after the accident, maybe 3 or 4. The literature's a little moving on that. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to be resolving a brain injury claim until you know you've got a final resting point, and then we want to at that point map out what would have been and what now will be.
Okay. And if the person, again, back to the comprehension issues, is having difficulty coming to terms with all of this, Steve, how do you accomplish having that person on side, because that's where they have to be for you to do your job properly?
Well, that raises some very interesting questions. I mean, we have to be comfortable that the person can actually understand the information we're giving them,
sure,
and that they're giving us instructions that are reasonable. If people's comprehension is that compromised, we might have to look at getting them a committee. It's like a legal representative. In the litigation, you can get a litigation guardian, so like a legal representative in the case who makes the decisions for this person.
Independent of the lawyer, or would that be you?
No. Okay. We wouldn't be acting. It would be a family member or someone trustworthy in their lives. And so that's a way to create a buffer for that person if they're not comprehending it. But very often it can just be that they're just struggling to live with this new life that they have, and the involvement of family members can be helpful, in helping translate information for people so that they can appreciate it.
And another thing the firm does, Scott, that perhaps we haven't touched on, I think, sufficiently, is you commit considerable resources to cases, to clients that you believe in. And in some cases, these are economically disadvantaged people who don't have all the money in the world and who are tapped out and who are injured and need rehab and in some cases, a fair bit of it for quite a long period of time.
Right. I mean, there's clients that come to us and they don't have any resources. I mean, most of our clients are not trust children or trust babies, as I think you've thrown out before.
Right.
Most people don't have the resources to withstand the consequences of a serious injury, either to go without money and to pay for the necessary rehab.
I don't think any of us do.
I don't think I could.
Yeah.
And so you really need a law firm to assist in that regard. So we do that. And in these substantial cases, like a brain injury case, typically the amount of money we have invested in that case is, $100,000 to $150,000 by the end of a trial. Mm-hmm. So not a small sum of money, a sizable sum of money. And if we lose the case, we don't see that.
Right. Tell us a little bit about the lady in Langley, Steve. That this is a woman who was hit by a train.
Yeah.
That's all. Those are the headline form of the story. That's what I'm good at. Flesh it out for us,
Sure.
would you?
Well, I think when people hear of cars being hit by trains, the first instinct people naturally have is, what the heck were they doing crossing the tracks?
Right.
But once you start doing a little bit more digging, and unfortunately this lady was rendered a quadriplegic as a result of being hit by this train.
I didn't realize that.
She had just started at a new job in this area only a couple of weeks before this accident. And as she was approaching the tracks, there were some confusing signage, and there was a mound of dirt with some foliage that was blocking her view. And so she stopped at a wrong stop sign. She was intending to stop at something further ahead than where she was hit. She was smoked and just horrific injuries.
Mm-hmm.
We're concerned about a head injury as well as the quadriplegia and her recovery from that. But this is going to be a case that will take a number of years.
Right.
We're going to we have to hire engineers to establish, the speeds, the directions.
The accident reconstruction. Then.
Accident reconstruction.
Sure, yeah.
And what we did find through an investigation, and most, a lot of lawyers would just walk away from these claims, but we found out that there was an accident at this exact same crossing a decade previous to this accident. And that as a result of that accident, there were recommendations made to improve the safety
of
at
the
this
railway.
location.
Right.
Doesn't look like it was done.
Interesting.
So it's going to be a very interesting battle as we go through this. I don't think there's any secrets in this, but
right. Okay. So how long? I'm backing it up now because here you have a seriously injured woman,
yes.
And so how long after the accident did she approach you? How long did it take her to retain your services?
She was in the hospital. She was still recovering. She was in GF Strong,
okay,
which is a
UBC?
rehab facility. Yeah. And she couldn't even move at that point. And I was brought in immediately. And in a case like that where liability is a big issue.
Right.
Remember we were talking earlier about when lawyers should get involved, but in something like that where you need a comprehensive, complex investigation to help put as much blame on the defendants as possible, we got involved right away, started interviewing witnesses, collecting this information, and it's going to make a world of difference at the end of this case.
So I guess by way of advice, Scott, as we wrap up the program, again, far too soon. These things have a way of getting just underway, and it's time to say goodbye. But before we do that, just further to what Steve was saying, with regards to retaining a lawyer when an accident occurs in which injury of a serious nature has happened as well. Give us the ABCs of getting that started.
Well, I think the first thing, everybody that's injured should call a lawyer and talk to them. But again, the age-old advice that I give, you don't necessarily need to hire one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then once there's a decision made by the client and the lawyer that it's an appropriate situation for the lawyer to be retained, the first thing you would want to do is, as Steve did in that case, is sort out liability. Start that investigation first, because that's the sort of information that'll disappear. Witnesses forget things.
Right.
Documents, if there's surveillance video or video on the at or around the area, that gets erased.
Sure,
So we really
traffic camera pictures can help a lot.
Yeah, so we really want to descend upon the liability investigation as quickly as we can so that we can preserve that information. And if it's information that we can't get, we want to send notices out to people that they should preserve it.
Right.
So that we've done as much as we can. The other thing that people don't appreciate is when you have accidents like this one that Steve's talking about, notices have to go out within 60 days to municipalities, or there is no claim against them. The claim is lost.
I see.
There's good reason to talk to counsel right away.
So the sooner the better. If it's a serious accident and there are injuries, then contact a lawyer. And and I've stated this many times with you people from MurphyBattista, if you don't need a lawyer, at the end of that initial conversation in which you basically laid out the nuts and bolts of the case, you'll see, Stephen and Scott, you've said so many times, Scott, if you don't need a lawyer, I'll be the first to tell you. But if you do, here's what you need to do next, and off you go.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
We're out of time. I regret that fact, but I am delighted that you took time to join us on the program again today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Scott Stanley and Steve Gibson from MurphyBattista LLP in Vancouver. And that does it for this episode of The Law Show. See you next time.